Be sure to check out Rob Plays. There you can hang out with me while we play video games and talk about life stuff. So what I want to do here is have a discussion about the various cosmic entities of the all-new, all-different Marvel Prime universe, starting with Galactus. And what I'm hoping is that at the end of all this, you'll have a strong understanding of his character relative to the number of issues that we have, as well as how his involvement in the new universe actually helps us to understand how things relate to the pre-Secret Wars universe. So the all-new, all-different Galactus comes to us as part of Al Ewing's all-new, all-different Ultimates. And while I will have a video on that team as part of the lead-up to Civil War II, what Al Ewing does here is actually really interesting. To sidetrack for a second, when Galactus first debuted in the original Marvel Universe, while he wasn't provided an origin in his first few appearances, the explanation of his existence came by way of Thor Volume 1, issues 168 through 170. Originally established as being a universal explorer named Gallon in the Earth-Zero continuity, at the end of that universe's life, Galactus remained the sole survivor, merging with that reality's version of eternity. During this birthing process, Galactus had fashioned a vessel for himself, allowing an incubation period of several million years where he gathered his energies, constructed a suit to contain those energies, and emerged as the Galactus that we all know and love, consuming planets to sustain his life. Now, while the reasons for Galactus being a cosmic necessity have changed over the years, ranging from a meta-commentary on his representation of life, death, and rebirth, as well as a physical force whose death unleashed Abraxas, who threatened the multiverse, on the whole, Al Ewing does not actually provide us with an expansive origin in the Marvel Prime universe. While there are different explanations that could be offered for this, in truth, I would surmise that with Galactus being such a well-known character, even if his origin is only slightly understood by casual readers, it's still understood. And so the information provided actually just gives us a one-page synopsis sticking with the classic story of Galactus hailing from the Earth-Zero continuity. That said, because the Ultimates exist to end threats to the universe, but to also boost fan anticipation for the start of the series, the first being encountered by the Ultimates came in the form of Galactus. Taking place in issues number 1 and number 2 in November and December of 2015 as the official launch title and a self-contained story, what we're told is that from the perspective of Blue Marvel and Black Panther, Galactus' hunger is not a requirement for him. Instead, this is a byproduct of the incubation period, meaning this process could be reversed. Now, something to take note of here is that Al Ewing is taking certain liberties, and that as far as I'm aware, the hunger of Galactus is an intrinsic part of his character, and no one had ever created a story where his hunger was depicted as something that could be cured. The only exception to this that I can think of came in the first 6 issues of the 2003 Thanos solo series by Jim Starlin, which depicted Galactus' hunger as a multiversal entity working through Galactus and attempting to consume realities. However, because this story arc stretched the limits of credulity even by comic standards, fans don't generally consider it to be canon or in existence. Now, in terms of the Ultimates, after putting their efforts together, Black Panther and Blue Marvel reasoned that if Galactus' hunger emerged following his time in the incubation chamber, the hunger could be reversed by forcing Galactus back into the chamber. To this end, the Ultimates backtracked Galactus' time as a devourer of worlds, eventually arriving at Archaeopia, the first planet Galactus had consumed after emerging. Scavenging the dead world and reconstructing the incubation chamber, the entirety of the Ultimates, including Carol Danvers, Monica Rambeau, America Chavez, and Black Panther, combined their powers in an effort to force Galactus back into his chamber. Emerging as the Lifebringer at the conclusion of issue number 2, Al Ewing established that instead of consuming worlds and ending life, Galactus now functions as the source of life, creating and healing worlds he had previously consumed, beginning with Archaeopia. Following this and going into the next 5 titles leading up to issue number 7 as the most current release, the Ultimates line served to provide 2 plots, the first following the Ultimates themselves and leading into Civil War II, with the second following Galactus and an explanation of the all-new, all-different Marvel Prime universe. Picking up in issue number 4 following the Ultimates' attempts to understand the space-time continuum in the post-Secret Wars continuity, Galactus himself was contacted by Eternity, who advised of the Ultimates' actions and that they could not proceed. Visiting the team amidst their journey into the previous realm of the Beyonders, which now exists as a void of nothingness, Al Ewing begins the first steps of referencing the pre-Secret Wars universe. Where Carol Danvers offers the explanation that the team sought to understand the space-time continuum, Galactus provides her with a glimpse of how he sees time, establishing that where Marvel had never officially provided an answer, the fact remains that Secret Wars was not a reboot. Instead, the events that took place in the Earth 616 universe still happened, but Secret Wars allowed for a reshuffling of characters and realities. This comes with the fact that, as Galactus shows us, The death of the original Captain Marvel, the Iron Man Armor Wars, and the Onslaught Saga are memories that he still maintains. At the same time, he also makes reference to Marvel's sliding timescale and the idea of retcons. To sidetrack, with Marvel's publications, it was standard practice for them to include dates and references to presidents throughout the 1960s and 1970s, but with the 1980s seeing their final reference to a concrete period in the real world, from that point going forward, all absolute dates of reference were eliminated. What this meant was that instead of saying Civil War happened in a certain year and during a certain month, instead, the event would take place with future stories referencing it as a year or 3 years ago. As a result, between 1984 and the current day, everything within Marvel Comics is assumed to have taken place within a 10-year window. In addition to this, Galactus states that the past is never concrete and that it can always be changed. Now this is really more of a meta-commentary on retroactive continuities and the idea that various writers will alter the history of Marvel's past in order to suit an existing story or to introduce a character. As an example, within the Marvel Universe itself, Blue Marvel did not exist until 2009 when Kevin Grevioux had created him and altered the history of Marvel to establish that Adam Brashear was Marvel's first black superhero. Now while I do have a video explaining these concepts in more detail for those who still find them a little confusing, with Galactus forcing the heroes to sleep and returning them to the main universe, he's called before eternity, who reveals that he's being kept in chains and was placed in this position by an unknown being. Now, something I actually want to do here is I want to step away from this for a minute, and I want to have a discussion on the role of eternity in the new Marvel Prime universe. Within the old universe, eternity existed as a singular being and a physical manifestation of each universe that existed. However, because Doom had created Battleworld during Secret Wars, while the planet was composed of different realities, instead of Battleworld having a version of eternity for each territory, the whole of Battleworld combined to allow for a singular entity who was kept under the control of Doom's power. Now this is particularly important due to the fact that the fan community was largely split over the idea of a multiversal version of eternity existing under the Living Tribunal and serving to represent the multiverse itself, holding it all together. While the idea of a multiverse eternity was alluded to but never really confirmed prior to and during Secret Wars, with Al Ewing's Ultimates, his information reveals that after the destruction of Battleworld and the creation of the multiverse by Owen Reese, Franklin Richards, and Reed Richards, a multiversal eternity came into existence, holding the multiverse together under the new Living Tribunal and spawning the cosmic entities. And so with the multiverse itself in chains, Galactus was tasked with discovering who it was that did this and how to restore things to normal. Picking up with issue number 6, where Galactus continues his quest as it was assigned by Eternity, during his travels, he encounters Master Order and Lord Chaos. As the representations of Order and Chaos who work against one another and maintain universal balance through their conflict, because Galactus had previously been known as the World Devourer, to the mind of Lord Chaos, Galactus represented destruction and catastrophe, but for Master Order, the destruction of Galactus was part of the cosmic order, allowing for the death of planets and the balance of the universal population. But because he has vacated that role and stepped into the position of the Lifebringer, Lord Chaos is no longer satisfied due to Galactus failing to inflict destruction, and Master Order is unsatisfied due to Galactus stepping away from the status quo. To this end, the entities transported Galactus to the Superflow, which existed as a space between realities, with the intention of forcing Galactus back into his position. However, because Master Order and Lord Chaos exist in such rigid forms, with Galactus maintaining free will, the two entities are completely overpowered and forced to retreat, after which Galactus is brought before Owen Reese, the Molecule Man. Now for this bit of the discussion, while we have previously engaged in a bit of meta-commentary, the conversation between Galactus and Owen Reese is extremely important due to the fact that Molecule Man will actually address the reader base directly and the community's view of the all-new, all-different universe. While Molecule Man gets extremely wordy and goes as far as to use a modified version of the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment, the long and short of this is that Molecule Man addresses the issue of Marvel existing in a state of flux. To sidetrack here, the thought experiment of Schrodinger's cat is a concept in quantum mechanics, offering the idea that if an unobserved action occurs, any and all possibilities of that action are available. However, once that observation occurs, an absolute answer is provided and the question is definitively answered. While this may seem a little confusing, to simplify things, Molecule Man is saying that the problem with the current universe is that it was rebooted, but it wasn't rebooted. Furthermore, there are some beings within the universe who do not remember the events of the multiversal collapse and Secret Wars, but there are also some who do. As a result, there are those who believed that the multiverse did collapse and was recreated, but there are also those that don't. What Al Ewing is doing here is offering a statement to us and Marvel saying that you can't have it both ways. You can't shuffle some characters around, introduce new teams, and offer conflicting memories, all while calling it a reboot if you haven't actually rebooted anything. Either it's a reboot, or it's not. That said, because we're only 7 issues into the series, we don't know what direction this story will take or where Galactus will end up. But because issue number 7 focuses entirely on the actions of Thanos as part of the lead up to Civil War II, we're actually going to go ahead and end this video right here. But with that being said, let me know how you guys feel about all new, all different Marvel, because I think it's kind of cool, some of the things that they're doing, but I think that some of the things they're doing could also use some changes. Anyway, I will catch you guys later. Peace.